And so wherever we see family members getting sick, we know that can't be post-traumatic stress disorder, because you can't pass or transfer post-traumatic stress disorder to someone who hasn't been exposed to the Gulf War, for example.
I've talked to thousands of them. I've met with them around the country. I've seen their scars, their emotional scars and their physical scars. I've seen the families that have been destroyed. They ask only that they be compensated and have some form of treatment to make their lives better. I am not being compensated, nor have I asked for any compensation from the Department of Defense. I am a nurse. I served as a flight nurse, and I served proudly. And I loved every minute of being in support of Operation Desert Storm. No prouder moment than putting on that flight suit and going to do a live mission. There is a flight nurse's creed, and it's very important to me. I will summon every resource to prevent the triumph of death over life. This I will do. I will not falter in war or in peace. And that's why I'm doing what I am doing, is I want these troops to get the help that they so deserve.
After I got back, I went to the blood bank to donate blood. I was told, oh, you're a Gulf War vet, you can't donate blood. I said, why? Well, we just got word that you can't. I find that a little disturbing.
The Centers for Disease Control says it is not aware of any scientific evidence to suggest that illnesses among Gulf War veterans are caused by infectious agents.
One troop told me that he had been to the VA numerous times to get help. He was losing the feeling in his legs. And finally, he called me one day and he said, Joyce, I'm going to the VA. This is the last time. He said, I'm in a wheelchair now. My wife is going to take me. My wife and my 2 kids are going to go over there, and we're going to try for the very last time to try and get some help. When he went to the VA, and he called me later that night to tell me what had happened, they told him, and then took his wife aside and said, we did a psychological evaluation on your husband, and we found that he's really a latent homosexual. And that just enraged his wife so much. They literally had to remove her from the VA. She said, how dare you say that in front of my husband, in front of my 2 children here? You know that's not the truth. But they would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep it off an objective physical finding. They used subjective and said, well, you're just imagining it, or you've got some type of psychosomatic reaction, you want to be sick, or you're just trying to get compensation. And for the majority of these troops, that just, it hurt them more, I think, than actually the illness itself.
I've heard recently a lot of comparison of this war to Vietnam, which is justified in a way. I've also heard from the other side that the casualties we've suffered is just a drop in the bucket compared to what was lost in Vietnam or what was lost in World War II. Well, I say, who's determining the value of human life? When did the body count determine the value of the cause? That's what I say.
What could have caused hundreds of thousands of GIs who fought in the first Gulf War to be suffering with so many debilitating conditions? And then you have about another 150,000 suffering from the second Gulf conflict.
I think it's a combination of about 4 or 5 different things that they were exposed to.
Well, many believe that they were exposed to experimental vaccines, and these experimental vaccines included botulism and anthrax. Also, they were used as human guinea pigs. They were injected with a genetically engineered mycoplasma. They were also exposed to depleted uranium, which even to this day the government claims is not a problem. We've been told that there were no biological weapons, no nerve gas, no chemical weapons, yet there's abundant evidence to the contrary. Why couldn't the Pentagon, the Defense Department, and the White House just be honest and let the soldiers know what potential risks were involved? In all this debate, nothing is more important than what happened to those whose lives are now at risk.
I think as most veterans, as we look around at what has happened throughout the years to veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War I, that nothing comes forward without squeezing and asking DOD, is this real? Did this happen?
They pushed the Gulf War vets into PTSD. It was not PTSD. It was physiological damage by the exposure agents that we had. If you push this off on post-traumatic stress, it costs them less money. They don't have to do all those heavy-duty diagnostic tests that you would have to for the physical damage.
It puts the onus back on the veterans themselves in a way, instead of on these toxic exposures. I think that this is absolutely disgusting, to try and blame the veterans themselves for their illnesses.
If 80,000 contaminated U.S. soldiers from the Gulf War I are granted some kind of monetary compensation, we are talking about billions upon billions of dollars, which nobody can afford. To decontaminate contaminated area of Iraq would be useless and a futile effort, and to pay compensation for everybody who is contaminated and found positive in our studies would be enormous commitment of money. Nobody wants to admit that they are doing indiscriminate damage to the soldiers and non-soldiers alike.
So what America is conducting is a nuclear war in the cradle of civilization. This is a war crime beyond belief, because it will be creating cancer for the rest of time, particularly in children and deformed babies, as we are seeing now.
If the people in this country knew the truth behind this, it could bring down the government as we know it. That's how serious it is.
The magnitude of this is that we've had to go to the press. And we've even been shut down through the press. Early on, I was told, be careful what you say, because we still need access to this active duty base. And if we have any trouble with the coverage that we're giving on this, then we'll have to shut it down.
The American media is supposed to be the guardian of our nation. They're supposed to identify the problems, they're supposed to report the problems, they're supposed to make Americans aware of the problems so that Americans can act. And that means contact members of Congress, contact members of the Department of Defense, contact the President and demand action, demand compliance with existing protocols, requirements, regulations, and orders and guidelines. They're not reporting, thoroughly reporting what has occurred. They're just not doing it, and for many reasons. Number one, the members of the Department of Defense and Administration, those leaders, exercise executive authority, and they simply lie about what's been known. Or they exert tremendous pressure to include retaliation against anybody that speaks out. And then the other last part is the members of the media, those responsible as guardians of our nation, simply don't want to report the total failures by the leaders in the Department of Defense, and the Center for Disease Control, the National Academy of Sciences, Federal Drug Administration, or the VA, or the White House. They lose access, they lose everything if they tell the truth.